I'd been writing orchestral pieces for a good number of years. About 15 years I was composer in residence to the Scottish Chamber Orchestra and to the BBC Phil and to the Royal Philharmonic, and running around the world conducting my own and other music. And I felt very much I wanted to have to do with chamber music. And I'd not really had the chance to write a string quartet between all these orchestral commissions for years and years and years.
Well, we were in discussions with his managers at the time. We're looking at re-releasing all the Maxwell Davies recordings on the Collins label, but that was old hat. So we figured, what new things could we do? And they mentioned that Peter hadn't really written any string quartets, and so I thought, well, why don't we do a series?
When this commission came up from Naxos Records, not for one string quartet, but for 10, I was absolutely delighted. My then manager phoned up Naxos Records and they met, and the idea seemed to go down very well. And then, of course, we had to choose a quartet to play 10 string quartets, we hoped, and the Magginis, of course, were the top candidates. But I was very worried because I thought they might like one or two, but then they'll probably be fed up and find it all too difficult, or we might not get on at all. So I was very nervous about the whole undertaking.
When the opportunity arose to commission string quartets from one of the greatest living composers, not only English but internationally living composers, of course we were excited to be able to do this enormous project. It would have been 10 string quartets, 2 every year over 5 years, and I think we're going to record the last volume this month.
When we first were considering the project of the Maxwell Davies quartets, I remember sitting around and looking at each other, 10 quartets in 5 years, and we knew there was going to be some slippage. We knew that, there ain't no composer we know about that's produced that sort of music in that sort of time, and we were wrong.
Well, it's been an extraordinary project, really, for the quartet to take part in, and quite a privilege. We've had these 10 quartets written for us over the last 5 or 6 years, and what's been very interesting is that they've evolved over the years as being a very different creation, perhaps, as to what Max initially envisaged.
When the project of doing the 10 Max quartets came along, we leapt at it. It was a fantastic challenge. It's been an amazing journey for us from every conceivable point of view. And again, felt very natural that it flowed out of the work that we'd been hitherto doing.
Right from the outset, I viewed this as some kind of novel in 10 chapters where they would all be part of a cycle and thematically interconnected.
It is a real cycle. It starts, it ends, and it goes back to the beginning. So, and in the course of these 10 quartets, then he's obviously commented on events of his time, but I think he's also responded to where he lives, to the natural environment in which he lives, the fact that it's Scotland.
I live in Orkney, and I spend a lot of time just walking. I've lived in Orkney for well over 35 years now, and this is a wonderful environment to think. It's not silent, but the sea makes a wonderful noise. It's always changing, it's exciting, it's soothing, and these are the background, I think, to all of the quartets, but particularly to the one concerning the lighthouses, because from the house you can see the North Ronaldsay light, and from just around the corner you can see the lights of 4 lighthouses, and I just love the rhythms.
Okay, so another complete take of the 5th movement. Thank you. Here we go. Red light coming. Thank you very much.
Come and listen.
The music would arrive, usually at my house, sent from the publishers. I would be the first to open it and look at it, and two bits of you come into play. One bit which says, look for the hard bits, see if you can play them, and the other bit which tries to have an overview. The next bit of the process would be, I'll deliver them in the next quartet rehearsal, and then we'd all devour them. And we learnt almost straight away. We had to look at the music before we could even play anything through. The idea of playing something through is far-fetched. You could play a series of bars and try and string them together.
And Michael, you don't get quiet.
But Max's music, of course, is enormously varied. And you have his more angry music, and you have his more reflective music. And his reflective music is usually playable at first reading, in a way. His angry music is not usually playable at first reading.
When we've been making the recordings, I have been present almost all the time. I don't want to say very much, because I've had my say before the first performance, wherever that's been, and worked very intensely with the quartet. But particularly I like to be there. Occasionally I've made last-minute changes to a chord or something just to improve the sonority.
It's so vital for us as performing musicians to have the opportunity of working with live composers. And the opportunity that we've had with Max over 5 years has been unique. I wouldn't say unprecedented, because, of course, Beethoven probably had that with Schuppanzig, and Shostakovich with the Beethoven Quartet.
This cycle of quartets would have been much, much more difficult had I not had constant rapport, exchange of ideas, encouragement, correction sometimes from the Maggini Quartet.
It's like anything, you know, you ask to play a concerto and you go and do it. But by the time we were 4 or 5 quartets into it, and the relationship with Max had really developed enormously, the responsibility of trying your best for Max was something that really mattered.
At first, we were very nervous of each other, but there was a moment very early on in rehearsal for the very first quartet when they realized that I didn't want them to make any sound which was contrary to the nature of their particular instrument and contrary to the nature of the string quartet.
Yes, he certainly uses the whole range of possibilities that string players can provide when it comes to effects and whether it be pizzicati or double stopping. It's everything is used, and he's very eager to know what is possible and what isn't possible.
I've often said that writing for string quartet, it's like dancing naked in public. There's nowhere to hide. You've got 4 voices there, and you can't hide behind brass chords or an introduction of percussion if inspiration flags or whatever, which I hope it doesn't. But you are totally exposed.
He has a very, both a light and a strong touch with his musicians. The light touch is, he'll be sitting in recordings and he'll just steer you occasionally in a few moments. And the other time is when you discover that he really did intend to stretch you, he really did intend to write that, and the labour you may have put in was something he knew about.
One of the first principles for composing string quartets is to realize that you're not just writing 4 lines of music which sound well together, but that you're writing for 4 human beings who are marvelous musicians, who have to be able to listen to what the other 3 are doing, make sense of it, understand their contribution to the whole effect, and feel loved and cared for, perhaps extended, and in certain aspects of virtuosity, probably made very angry on occasion. But they have to understand that they have a real musical function in the quartet.
Of course, composers vary. Some say very little. But when we first met Max, he didn't know us, we didn't know him. We'd simply prepared the first quartet for him. And he was somebody who was prepared to work in great detail with us so that we really understood the gesture and the musicality behind every phrase.
And occasionally, the pacing hasn't quite worked. And I've said, well, can you exaggerate that retard a little bit or speed it up a little bit here? And that isn't quite the speed I wanted. But basically, I've been in the background, but it's very reassuring for me that it sounds, when it's going into the can, like I imagined it in my head when I was writing it. And I think if it doesn't work, then there's nobody to blame but me.
We've got to be much more special.
I thought the very first one at A was good, because that was very phasey, very, but we've got to try and get the same quality on every one of them, I think.
Just a little bit warmer, and yeah, I'll do it.
Just we could just be properly relaxed.
Yeah. What's the balance? The bar 36. I'm terribly prominent in that. We're 40, aren't we?
36? I didn't think 36.
Yeah, 36. I can only hear myself there.
Oh, you're kidding? You heard my too sharp G.
Can I just see the score for a minute?
No, you could certainly hear me there.
I have very personal feelings for, well, actually in many ways for each of them, but I have a particular affection for quartets 3 and 4. 3 because it was obviously of such importance to Max.
The third quartet started off being a fairly well-behaved, ordinary string quartet with an allegro first movement, but then the Iraq War started. I'd been right at the head of that huge crowd in London which protested against that. This anger got into this music, but I think it is the function of music to represent everything that you believe is right and true, and to make statements, no matter how they might offend politicians, for instance, because you have to say the truth as you perceive it. And that was very much uppermost in my mind at that moment, and it erupts into the music with cold fury.
Max has written the 10th quartet, which will be obviously the final quartet in the series, very much with my successor, Lorraine McCaslin, in mind. She's Scottish, and I believe that it will reflect her background in terms of the actual music and perhaps the dance and the folk elements in that. So I think that'll be a wonderful way for the whole project to finish.
I think quartet number 10 is much better than number 1 in that I understood much more about writing for quartet by the time I came to do that. Of course, I had written for string quartet many years before, but I had some experience when I came to number 1, and I've studied string quartets, and I particularly love Haydn's quartets, but by the time I came to number 2, I knew some more, number 3, some more, and so on right through. Ending the last one, number 10, it was potentially very, very difficult, but I circumnavigated the problem by refusing to do it. And the last movement, when it becomes clear how it's going to finish to somebody who's playing or listening, and it's going to go pom, pom, pom with a nice cadence, it quite simply stops. It doesn't finish, and there's not even a bar line, never mind a double bar line at the end. and I've asked the players to just freeze, and it stops.